The bully who mocked my scars became a reality TV star, and they want me to join their show for ratings. I never thought I'd be telling this story, especially not after all these years. Some part of me believed that chapter of my life was sealed shut, those memories boxed up, buried somewhere deep, never to be revisited. But here I am, rummaging through old journals in my childhood bedroom, trying to piece together how my teenage bully, a person who once mocked my scars so viciously that I developed an almost paralyzing fear of being seen, has suddenly reappeared in my life. And not just reappeared casually or through social media, but as a freaking reality TV star who wants me, of all people, to be part of their show for ratings. If you'd told me a month ago that I'd be entertaining a phone call from the same person who made my high school years a living hell, I'd have laughed. But life, as always, has a sick sense of humor, and now I'm caught in the middle of a whirlwind I never asked for. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Roxanne Roxy for short, 28F, and I've spent the past decade or so hiding my scars, physically and emotionally, from a world that I feared would judge me the way my old classmates did. A single childhood accident led to permanent scarring on my arms, shoulders, and part of my neck. At first, the doctors said I was lucky. The car crash could have been far worse. Instead, I walked away with bruises, a fractured leg, and second-degree burns that left me with these jagged patches of discolored skin. I was 10 years old at the time, and in those first months, all I cared about was the pain, physical pain, that felt like my entire body was on fire. Later came the surgeries, the ointments, the daily routines of applying medication to help the skin heal. But nobody prepared me for the stares and whispers once I returned to school, or for the cruel jokes some kids would make. I was still a child when I had to start answering questions like, "What happened to your arms?" or ignoring the giggles whenever I wore a short-sleeved shirt. Most kids were more curious than mean, but there were enough nasty remarks to make me self-conscious. By middle school, I'd become an expert in layering clothing, even in summer. I developed this habit of crossing my arms to hide the worst patches on my forearms. My parents did what they could to support me, therapy sessions, gentle encouragement to help me see I was still beautiful. But kids can be cruel in ways that even the best parents can't entirely shield you from. And then high school happened. That's when I met Jasmine, 28F, the girl who would become my personal tormentor. Jasmine was one of those people who had everything you'd think a teenager would want. Good looks, popularity, money, a swarm of admirers trailing her from class to class. She was charismatic, always at the center of attention, with a wardrobe that seemed endless and brand new each season. On my very first day of freshman year, she clocked me as an easy target, shy, insecure, wearing oversized hoodies, flinching whenever anyone made eye contact for too long. She and her clique zeroed in on me like a shark smelling blood in the water. She was the first person to ever call me a freak to my face, to snicker about how I must have been too ugly for a normal burn, or how someone spilled acid on me. She was a master at weaponizing my biggest insecurity. At first, I tried to ignore it. I had friends, fellow outcasts, mostly who defended me and told me to pay her no mind. But ignoring Jasmine was impossible because her comments got bolder by the day. The subtle jabs in the hallway escalated into notes left on my locker, or staged scenes in the cafeteria where she'd loud whisper that I should cover my gross arms before people lost their appetites. Teachers rarely intervened. Some tried, but Jasmine was cunning enough to act sweet around them. So I endured, burying my pain and shame deeper. I remember one particular day. I was in gym class, forced to wear short sleeves in front of everyone, and Jasmine glanced at my arms and said, in the cruelest sing-song voice, "Hide your scales, lizard girl." Her friends roared with laughter, and I felt my face flush red hot. That phrase haunted me for weeks. By junior year, I was trying to find ways to skip any class where I'd be forced to show my arms. My grades slipped. I started having panic attacks at the thought of going to school. My parents, alarmed, started talking to counselors and even considered switching districts. But we didn't have the money to just pack up and move. And the idea of transferring in the middle of high school felt like running away. Instead, I hunkered down and survived on autopilot until graduation. The day I got my diploma, I felt like I'd just been released from prison. After high school, I vowed never to let anyone's opinion of my scars define me again. It was a lofty promise, and I didn't always keep it. There were still moments I felt that old fear creeping up, that impulse to wear long sleeves on a sweltering day. But I worked with a therapist, joined a few online support groups for burn survivors, and began the slow process of healing, not just physically, but emotionally. I discovered a passion for photography and ended up going to a small arts college an hour away from home. Being in a new environment helped. No one knew me as the girl with the scars or lizard girl. I could craft a new identity, quiet, artsy, a bit of an introvert, sure, but not a victim. I even made a few friends who accepted me, scars and all, without a second thought. Over time, I learned how to deal with intrusive questions or stares. It's a long story, I'd say, if people asked. If they persisted, I'd give a condensed version. And something amazing happened. Some people responded with empathy, others with disinterest. And rarely did I face outright cruelty anymore. It was like I'd left that part of my life behind, relegated to yearbooks and teenage nightmares. I built a small but fulfilling life. A decent job doing freelance photography and design, a cozy apartment I shared with two friendly roommates, Naomi, 27F, and Sam, 29M, and a routine that felt comfortable, stable, safe. Then, about 6 months ago, I was casually scrolling through social media when I stumbled upon an announcement that nearly made me drop my phone. Watch Jasmine on The Perfect Pair, a brand new reality show where singles compete to find love and fame on a tropical island. My heart hammered in my chest. Jasmine? Reality star? Was that really the same Jasmine from high school, or just someone with a similar name? My curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked through. Sure enough, her face popped up, older but unmistakable. She had the same confident smirk, the same well-coiffed hair, though now bleached to a platinum blonde. In her bio, she was described as an entrepreneur, social media influencer, and aspiring actress. My mouth went dry. All those memories of being humiliated, of wanting to disappear in the hallways, came rushing back. I shut the app, trying to calm my racing thoughts. At first, I tried to avoid the topic. Reality TV wasn't my thing anyway, so I figured I wouldn't have to see her face plastered everywhere. But The Perfect Pair took off. It became a surprise hit, trending on Twitter and Instagram. Clips of Jasmine's dramatic confrontations with other contestants started flooding my feeds. People were either calling her the Queen of Shade or the villain of the season. She was playing her role well, leaning into her natural knack for drama and manipulation. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me. So what if Jasmine was on TV? It wasn't like she'd come back into my life. She was off in LA or Miami or some tropical island set far away from me. But life has a twisted sense of humor. One evening, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. A chirpy female voice greeted me, introducing herself as Candace, 31F, a casting producer for a show called Reunited Reality. She said she'd gotten my contact from an old high school acquaintance who recommended me for an upcoming spin-off special. Confused, I asked what the show was about. She explained that it was a high-concept project combining elements of reality TV, talk show confessions, and personal transformations. They wanted to bring old classmates, or old friends and enemies, together to see if they could resolve past conflicts and maybe form some kind of reconciliation. It sounded like a messy exploitation of personal trauma for entertainment, which in many ways is exactly what reality TV is known for. I was about to politely decline when Candace dropped the bombshell. Jasmine, the star of The Perfect Pair, was going to be the show's centerpiece. She would be filming her own spin-off series focusing on her journey to make amends with people from her past. The network had pitched the idea after seeing how polarizing she was on The Perfect Pair. They wanted a redemption arc, presumably, or at least more drama, and apparently my name had come up as one of Jasmine's most important old connections. Candace tried to sweeten the deal by mentioning that I could share my side of the story, get some screen time, and maybe even open up about my experiences to a supportive audience. She even hinted there'd be financial compensation. I felt like I was going to throw up. The idea of sitting in front of cameras, rehashing my most painful memories of being bullied, was horrifying enough. But to do it for Jasmine's benefit so she could look good as she made amends or used me for ratings? Absolutely not. Every instinct screamed to say no. I politely told Candace I wasn't interested, then ended the call, my heart hammering as though I'd just run a marathon. Over the next couple of weeks, the calls didn't stop. Candace tried again. Another producer reached out. Then Jasmine herself sent me a direct message on social media. My handle wasn't hard to find since I used it for my photography portfolio. She wrote something like, "Hey Roxy, long time no see. I know things weren't always great between us in high school, but I'd love a chance to catch up and maybe clear the air. Let me know if you'd be open to chatting." It took everything in me not to block her immediately. Instead, I closed the app and told myself not to engage. But they kept pushing. One day, I received an email from the production company's legal department detailing the participation package, essentially a contract. They offered a decent chunk of money, an all-expenses-paid trip to a luxury resort for filming, and some spin about how this was a chance to share my story with the world, to bring awareness to bullying and body positivity. I admit the money caught my attention. Freelance photography isn't always steady, and I'd been behind on some bills. My roommates and I were talking about moving to a cheaper apartment soon. The idea that I could earn a decent paycheck for a week of filming was tempting. But at what cost? I vented to my roommates, Naomi and Sam, who were both appalled and intrigued. Naomi said, "This could be a chance for you to expose how bad she really was." Sam joked that maybe I could serve some righteous revenge in front of the cameras. But I wasn't so sure. Reality TV is notoriously manipulative. They edit footage to create the narrative they want. I'd have little control over how they portrayed me. I didn't want to become the bitter burn victim, pitted against the misunderstood star. I also didn't want to re-traumatize myself. Yet I wondered, was there any chance that Jasmine really had changed? Could this be an opportunity for me to confront her, stand up for myself in a way I never could at 16? Was that even worth the emotional toll? I kept ignoring the offers. Then, a few weeks later, a letter arrived at my door. Hand-delivered from Jasmine herself, according to the note. My roommate said a courier came by, not a mailman. The envelope was fancy, gold-trimmed, with my name in cursive on the front. Inside was a short, handwritten letter. "Roxy, I know you probably hate me, and I don't blame you. I was awful to you in high school, and I'm really sorry. I've grown up a lot, and I'd love a chance to make things right. Please consider joining me on this new show. It won't just help me, it could also help others who watch, people who've gone through bullying or body image struggles. You'd have a platform to speak your truth. I'm ready to face whatever you need to say to me. Also, I hope you'll accept the financial compensation. Think of it as a small way for me to pay back the pain I caused. I really want to do better. If you want to talk, here's my private number. Jasmine." I read and reread the letter, trying to parse if there was any sincerity in her words. "I was awful to you" was an understatement if ever there was one. But the letter didn't sound like the arrogant bully I remembered. Could she really have changed? Could the reality TV experience have humbled her? Or was this all a calculated move? She was rumored to be negotiating her own talk show deal, so maybe an on-camera redemption arc was exactly what she needed to go from villain to America's sweetheart. Either way, my life was being disturbed again. I wanted nothing more than to toss the letter in the trash, but something tugged at me. Curiosity, unresolved anger, maybe even the promise of financial relief. I ended up calling Tasha, 30F, a friend from my college photography program, someone who knew bits of my past but wasn't part of that small-town environment. Tasha gave me calm, rational advice. "Look, if you're hesitant, you should go in with boundaries. Talk to a lawyer or someone who can help you negotiate the contract so you're protected. And if it's too triggering, you can always say no." She also pointed out that some forms of confrontation can be healing if I felt I was in control. But there was the rub. Would I ever be in control around Jasmine? Eventually, after days of internal debate, I decided to text Jasmine's private number. I figured a simple conversation might clarify her intentions. She responded almost immediately, sounding excited but also carefully apologetic. "I know I was a total mean girl," she wrote. "I'm not proud of who I was. I'd love to make amends, and the show is part of that. But I also want to talk one-on-one first. No cameras." That sounded somewhat reassuring. We arranged a phone call for the next evening. I was so anxious leading up to it that my palms sweat just at the thought of hearing her voice again. When I finally summoned the courage to dial her number, her voice came through bright and cheerful. "Roxy, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. How are you?" My throat felt tight, but I managed a curt, "I'm fine, Jasmine. Let's cut to the chase. Why do you want me on your show?" She paused, perhaps taken aback by my directness, then launched into a spiel about how the producers asked her for the most significant person she'd wronged in her past, and she immediately thought of me. She said it with a tone that suggested regret, but also a certain pride, like she was acknowledging I had been important in some twisted way. She apologized multiple times in that reality TV confessional style, talking about how she's grown and seen the error of her ways. She also emphasized that my presence could be inspirational, that it wouldn't be just about her redemption, but about giving me a platform to talk about overcoming bullying. I didn't exactly believe her. People can say all kinds of things when they want something from you. I asked her point blank, "What do you really get out of this?" She sighed, then admitted, "Look, I can't lie. The network wants a dramatic storyline. They've offered me this spin-off only if I confront my past. I genuinely feel bad for what I did, but yes, I also need this for my career. That's the honest truth. Does it have to be a bad thing, though? We can both benefit. You get paid, you get to speak your truth, maybe you find closure. I get my redemption arc. The audience sees both sides." Her candor, twisted as it was almost refreshing. She wasn't hiding that there was a professional incentive. At least that was more honest than some phony altruism. I told her I'd think about it. She thanked me, said she'd respect whatever decision I made. After I hung up, I felt nauseous, a swirl of anger and confusion churning in my gut. This was a moral and emotional quagmire. On one hand, the idea of letting her profit off my pain enraged me. On the other, maybe this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to confront her in a setting where she couldn't just brush me off or humiliate me. And the money? I hated that money factored in, but it did. My savings account was laughably small. I'd been wanting to upgrade my photography equipment for ages, expand my business, but couldn't afford it. This could change that. But at what psychological price? I spoke to my therapist about it. She suggested I consider whether I felt capable of facing Jasmine without becoming re-traumatized. She reminded me that I had control over how much I shared on camera, that I could set boundaries, request certain conditions in my contract, like editorial approval over how my story was presented. This led me to actually consult a small-time entertainment lawyer recommended by a friend. He looked over the contract from the production company and told me it was typical reality show fare, but that I could negotiate certain terms, like ensuring I had the final say on any footage that was used specifically about my scars, or that I could walk away without penalty if I felt unsafe. It was all new territory to me. The lawyer was reassuring, though. "You'd be surprised how flexible they can be if they really want you," he said. "They need you more than you need them." Armed with this information, I reached out to Candace and laid out my demands. A more substantial appearance fee, the right to leave at any time if I felt uncomfortable, and the right to veto any footage that specifically showed close-ups of my scars in a degrading or sensationalized manner. To my surprise, they didn't balk. After some back and forth, they agreed. The appearance fee was bumped to a figure that made me do a double take, and they even offered a post-show therapy stipend, likely so I wouldn't sue them later for emotional distress. I had a week to sign. My roommates were practically telling me to do it, to stick it to her, and to cash that check. Meanwhile, my heart pounded with doubt. Finally, after nights of tossing and turning, I signed on. I felt numb as I emailed the contract, half certain I'd regret it. But I told myself, I'm not the same terrified teenager anymore. If Jasmine thinks she can manipulate me on camera, she'll find that I've learned how to stand up for myself. Or at least that's the pep talk I gave myself. Production started about a month later. The premise was this: the show would feature Jasmine meeting various people from her past whom she'd wronged, ex-friends, ex-boyfriends, even an estranged cousin, and attempt to make amends in a setting chosen by the producers. My segment would be a 2-part special filmed at a fancy retreat center near the mountains. They wanted a scenic backdrop to frame our heartfelt conversations. I flew out on a Friday, put up in a luxurious lodge with a private room that had a balcony overlooking a pristine lake. It was honestly the nicest place I'd ever stayed. A production assistant greeted me with a friendly smile, showed me around, and handed me a schedule. The next morning, I'd have a preliminary interview. The day after, Jasmine and I would film our big sit-down. Then, there would be some group activity portion where we'd do a trust exercise or something equally cringeworthy. I tried not to freak out that first night in the lodge. The bed was too soft, the silence too complete. My mind raced with all the worst-case scenarios. Would Jasmine ambush me in front of the cameras? Would I freeze up and let her belittle me again? My scars weren't as physically painful as they once were, but the psychological wounds felt raw under the threat of re-exposure. I texted Tasha, who reminded me I had the option to leave if things got ugly. That helped calm me somewhat. The next morning, I was ushered into a small interview set. A bright ring light and some softbox lights glowed around an armchair, which I sat in. A producer, a sound technician, and an off-camera interviewer were present. They asked me about my background, my experience with bullying, how it felt to be there. It all felt rehearsed, and I stumbled a few times, feeling that old anxiety flare up. But the interviewer was gentle, nodding sympathetically as I recounted how Jasmine's bullying impacted my teenage years. I even felt tears welling up at one point, but I held it together. They asked if I was open to forgiveness. I dodged, saying, "I'm open to seeing if she's really changed." They seemed pleased with my cautious stance. It would build drama, I guessed. After lunch, I was told Jasmine had arrived and was doing her own interviews in a separate part of the resort. Apparently, we'd only see each other the following day for the big conversation. I spent the rest of the afternoon on edge, feeling like I was in some bizarre social experiment. That evening, I forced myself to go for a walk around the lake, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. The mountains in the distance were stunning, the sunset painting the sky in pinks and oranges. I paused to take pictures on my phone, wishing I'd brought my professional camera, but knowing that the production company had rules about me filming or photographing behind the scenes. Still, those few moments of natural beauty helped me breathe a little easier. Then came the big day. I woke up early, hardly able to eat breakfast. A hairstylist and makeup artist arrived at my door to prepare me. I was unsettled by the notion of them wanting to make me camera ready, but I tried to see it as a perk. The makeup artist asked if I wanted to cover my scars. I froze for a moment, then said no, just leave them. Maybe a bit of concealer around the edges if you can, so it's not drawing attention. But I'm not hiding them. She nodded understandingly, and I felt a spark of pride. I wouldn't let them be the star of the show, but I also wouldn't be ashamed of them. That was a huge step for me. By late morning, I was taken to an outdoor patio area overlooking the lake. Cameras were everywhere, arranged to capture multiple angles. A plush love seat sat facing another chair, probably where Jasmine would be. A gentle breeze blew across the water, rustling the pine trees. The smell of pine needles and sun-warmed wood hung in the air. A production assistant fiddled with my mic, instructing me not to tap it or move too abruptly. The director explained that they'd do a brief introduction, then Jasmine would come in for our conversation. They encouraged me to be natural and honest. My stomach churned with nerves. Finally, the cameras started rolling. The interviewer gave a short introduction about how Jasmine was reconnecting with someone from her past, Roxy, who faced intense bullying during her high school years. Then they signaled that Jasmine would enter. I held my breath. She emerged from a doorway, wearing a stylish white sundress that contrasted with her newly tanned skin. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and a warm smile curved her lips, a smile that looked more like a carefully rehearsed expression than genuine emotion. She approached with her arms outstretched. "Roxy," she breathed, as though greeting a dear friend. I stood, uncertain if I should accept the hug she seemed to offer. The cameras likely wanted a dramatic moment. After a brief hesitation, I let her hug me, but I stayed stiff, barely returning the embrace. We sat down, facing each other. She started by telling me how grateful she was that I agreed to be here. She spoke about regrets, how she'd had time to reflect on her high school behavior, how she realized she'd been insecure and took it out on others. Her voice trembled slightly, and she placed her hand over her chest like she was baring her soul. It was an impressive performance, and maybe part of it was genuine. But I didn't forget the countless times she'd humiliated me. When the interviewer prompted me, I talked about what it felt like to be mocked, how the insults about my scars made me feel less than human. I tried not to cry, but my voice wavered. Jasmine nodded, lips pressed together, a tear glistening in her eye. She apologized again, this time more specifically. I made fun of your scars, called you names I'm ashamed to repeat. I was a bully, Roxy, and I hate that I caused you so much pain. The cameras zoomed in for close-ups. I could practically hear the reality TV audience gasping. For a moment, I wondered if this could actually be healing. Maybe she was truly contrite. Maybe I could find some closure. I told her how her words followed me for years, how I avoided social situations and even wore long sleeves in 90-degree weather. Her eyes teared up again, and she said she'd had no idea the extent of the damage. She seemed genuinely shaken. I almost believed her. But then the director asked us to pause so they could switch camera angles. The moment the cameras cut, Jasmine's tearful expression vanished like a mask. She turned to a makeup artist and asked for a quick touch-up, sounding almost bored. My stomach sank. Was this all an act? When filming resumed, she was back to the emotional contrition. The whiplash from seeing her off-camera demeanor made me question every word she said on camera. Still, I tried to stay composed, focusing on my own truth. If she was acting, fine, but I could still speak honestly at least. At one point, she reached across to take my hand and said, "You have no idea how sorry I am," lightly grazing the scars on my forearm with her thumb. A part of me flinched, but I let her hold my hand for the sake of the scene. I calmly replied, "I appreciate the apology, but apologies are only words unless you back them up with actions." After about an hour, the director announced we'd take a break, then do a second segment with some exercises or group therapy questions. I escaped to the bathroom, my pulse racing. In the mirror, I could see the tension in my eyes, the tightness in my shoulders. I tried to do some breathing exercises, reminding myself I could leave any time if it got unbearable. Then, a production assistant burst in, apologizing for invading my space. An output said they wanted to mic me up again and capture some candid thoughts. I glared, but let them do their job. Reality TV was so invasive. We moved on to a portion where a therapist-like figure led us through an empathy exercise. We were supposed to take turns describing the other person's potential struggles. Jasmine said the usual things. Her parents divorced young. She felt pressured to be perfect. She lashed out at others to mask her own insecurities. Some of it might have been real, but she delivered it like she was reading from a script. Then she looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to say something about how I empathized with her. The cameras were rolling. I swallowed hard and said, "I can understand the pressure to live up to expectations, but it doesn't excuse cruelty." My voice sounded stronger than I felt inside. Next, we tackled trust exercises. One was a version of the trust fall, which is about the cheesiest thing I could imagine. I stood there, arms crossed over my chest, while Jasmine was supposed to catch me. The producers insisted. I told them I wasn't comfortable, but they really pushed, promising it would be a powerful moment. I relented. We stood on a small platform, maybe 2 feet high. I faced away from Jasmine, my heart pounding, remembering how many times I felt unsafe around her. The cameras zoomed in on my face. I closed my eyes, arms folded, and let myself fall backward. She actually caught me, albeit with a slight stumble. The crew applauded as if we'd just won an Olympic medal. I felt a weird swirl of relief and anger. This was so staged, yet still emotionally charged for me. After the trust fall, they declared the day's filming was done, though there'd be a final group dinner that evening. "Great job, you two," the director enthused. "That was truly heartfelt stuff." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt exhausted. The minute the cameras were off, Jasmine slid right back into her casual persona. "That was intense," she said, flipping her hair. "Want to grab a drink before dinner?" The whiplash unsettled me. I politely declined, saying I needed some alone time. I found my way to a secluded spot by the lake, away from the prying eyes of the camera crews. I wanted to process everything, the conversation we'd had, her apology, the weird facade that seemed to drop whenever cameras weren't rolling. It all twisted my stomach in knots. I tried to remind myself that I'd come here to speak my truth, to maybe find closure. But I wondered if real healing could happen in a manufactured environment like this. Naomi and Sam texted me, asking how things were going. I typed a long message describing the day, how fake it all felt, but how maybe, just maybe, some part of Jasmine's remorse was genuine. Naomi sent back a bunch of angry face emojis telling me to keep my guard up. Sam told me to do whatever I needed to protect my well-being. Both reminded me I could walk away. The production company would hate it, but I had that right. I told them I'd stick it out at least until dinner, see what else Jasmine had to say. That evening, I met Jasmine and a few producers in the resort's dining room at a fancy wood-paneled space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit lake. Candles flickered on the table, creating a cozy vibe. The cameras weren't rolling, as far as I could tell. The producers said they wanted this to be a casual conversation. We ordered dinner, and I ended up sipping a glass of wine, hoping it'd calm my nerves. Jasmine chatted about her experiences on The Perfect Pair, how crazy the drama had been. She even teased that she might be in talks for a new show called Diving for Diamonds, some dating competition on a yacht, or something equally absurd. I sat there, quietly picking at my food, amazed at how normal she acted. Halfway through the meal, she turned to me and said, quietly enough that the producers couldn't hear, "Listen, Roxy, I know this environment is weird, but I do mean what I said. I'm sorry, and I hope you can see I'm trying." I studied her face, searching for signs of sincerity. "I appreciate that," I replied carefully, "but I can't just flip a switch and forgive everything." She nodded, biting her lip. "I understand," she said. "If there's anything I can do." She paused, as if weighing her words. "I'll do it." I wanted to ask her point blank if she was only doing this for the cameras, but I chickened out. Instead, I told her, "Actions speak louder than words," echoing my earlier sentiment. She nodded again, then changed the subject to something trivial, like the resort's spa treatments. The rest of the dinner was uneventful. We parted ways with a polite goodnight. In my room, I flopped onto the bed, exhausted. Tomorrow, the plan was for me to leave. The producers had enough footage for my segment, or so they said. A part of me felt conflicted. Was that all there was? Some tears on camera, a few trust exercises, a half-baked apology, and we were done? It felt incomplete, but also draining. Maybe that's how reality TV goes, capture enough dramatic moments, then move on. But in the morning, just before I was set to check out, I got a text from Jasmine. "Meet me by the lake, no cameras, please." I hesitated, then agreed. Why not see what she wanted? My flight wasn't until afternoon. I walked down to the shore where she stood looking out at the water, arms crossed against the crisp morning air. She wore a simple cardigan and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked more like a normal person than the glam reality star. When she saw me, she smiled, but it was subdued. "Thanks for coming," she said softly. "I know you're leaving soon. I just wanted to talk without the cameras." I nodded, keeping a bit of distance between us. She seemed nervous, fiddling with the hem of her cardigan. I feel like the show never really allows for real conversations. Everything's orchestrated." She laughed bitterly. "Kind of ironic, huh? A reality show that's so fake." "Yeah," I murmured. "I noticed." She exhaled, turning her gaze to the water. "Anyway, look, I wanted to apologize again, but in a way that's not about cameras or storylines. I was a horrible person to you, Roxy. I don't even have a good excuse. I was just insecure, craving attention, and I found a target in you because you seemed vulnerable. That's messed up. I've done a lot of therapy myself, and I know it doesn't erase the damage." Her voice trembled a bit. "If I could go back in time and undo it, I would. But I can't, so all I can do is say I'm sorry and mean it." A lump formed in my throat. This was the first time I'd heard her speak so plainly without the performance. I studied her face. Her eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked genuinely remorseful. "I appreciate that," I said. "Really. But it's going to take time for me to figure out how I feel. You made a huge impact on my life. I carried that pain for years." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I get it," she whispered, "and I don't blame you if you never forgive me, but I wanted you to know that it wasn't just for the cameras. I really do feel awful." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just said, "Thank you for telling me." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I know I'll probably never be your friend, but I hope at least you can heal. And if there's anything I can do beyond the show, let me know. I gave a faint smile, still guarded. We'll see, I said. I have a lot to work through. She nodded, and for a few seconds we stood in silence. The wind rippled across the lake, carrying the scent of pine and fresh water. Then she cleared her throat, turning to face me fully. You're a really strong person, you know, surviving what you did physically and then dealing with my crap on top of it. Her gaze flicked to the faint outline of scars on my arms. I hope you know you have nothing to be ashamed of. My eyes stung with tears. It was surreal to hear this from the girl who once ridiculed me for the very thing she was now praising me for. Thanks, I managed to say. We stood there a moment longer, letting the words settle. Then she mumbled something about having to meet the producers soon. We gave each other a tentative, awkward hug. It felt more real than the hug on camera. Then she walked away, leaving me by the water, alone with my swirling thoughts. On the flight home, I replayed that conversation in my mind. Was Jasmine sincere? Or was she practicing a polished secondary act for me alone, anticipating that it could still end up on camera somehow? I truly couldn't tell, but something in me wanted to believe her, if only for my own peace. I guess some part of me needed to imagine that people could change, that the cruelty I suffered wasn't just a fixed trait in her, but a reflection of some deeper pain or immaturity. That day by the lake might have been the closest I'd ever get to real closure, whether it was partly genuine or partly orchestrated. When I landed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. For days, I kept expecting phone calls or messages from the producers, but the only contact I got was from Candace, who thanked me for my participation and said they'd let me know when the episode was set to air. I threw myself back into my photography work, trying to distract myself from rehashing the experience. But no matter what I did, I found myself thinking about Jasmine's final words. I hope you know you have nothing to be ashamed of. That line echoed in my head. I realized that for years I'd been living like I had something to hide, like my scars were a badge of shame rather than a testament to my survival. A few weeks after the show, I found myself looking at my portfolio, noticing how I rarely included photos of myself. I'd never done a portrait project, which is something many photographers try. On a whim, I set up my tripod in my small apartment studio and started snapping pictures of my arms, my torso, the textured patterns of my scars. I wasn't sure what I was doing at first. Maybe I was trying to reclaim something. As I looked through the images, I felt a surge of emotions. Sadness for what I'd been through, but also pride for what I'd overcome. They were raw, intimate, and for the first time, I didn't cringe at my own reflection. Instead, I saw a body that had endured and survived. That day, I posted one of those images on my social media photography page with a short caption about my experience as a burn survivor. It was terrifying to hit publish, but the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Friends, family, even strangers sent messages of admiration, empathy, and praise for my bravery in sharing. It felt liberating, like a heavy weight had been lifted. A month later, the show aired. My phone lit up with texts from old classmates and acquaintances who saw me on TV. I braced myself for the worst snide remarks or pity, but most messages were surprisingly positive. They said things like, "I'm so glad you spoke out," and "I had no idea what you went through." A few people confirmed what I feared. The editing tried to portray Jasmine in a sympathetic light, emphasizing her tears and contrition. They made our conversation look extra dramatic, with ominous music building tension before she caught me in the trust fall. But they also gave me space to talk about my scars and the lasting impact of her bullying. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't the train wreck I'd feared. Maybe because I'd insisted on certain protections in my contract, or maybe because the producers genuinely wanted a redemption story. Either way, I came across as resilient, if a bit cautious, and Jasmine came across as someone trying to atone for her past. The show generated a buzz. A few online articles labeled it one of the most authentic episodes of the series, citing the emotional rawness. My social media gained a modest following of people who found my story relatable or inspiring. I received messages from other burn survivors, from those who'd faced bullying, from folks who were just moved by the idea that scars, physical or emotional, don't have to hold you back. One day, an email came from a small nonprofit that works with burn survivors asking if I'd be interested in speaking at their local chapter. They'd seen me on the show, read my post about my scars, and thought my story could help others. The irony wasn't lost on me. The bully who mocked my scars had inadvertently helped me find a platform to embrace them publicly. And Jasmine? She kept climbing the reality TV ladder. A few weeks after our episode aired, she announced she'd be starring in that new yacht dating show. On her social media, she posted behind-the-scenes videos, glamorous selfies, and cryptic messages about leaving the past behind for a brighter future. She never directly mentioned me or the show we did, but I did receive a short text from her the night the episode aired. I hope you're okay with how they edited everything. Thank you for giving me a chance to apologize. Wishing you the best, Roxy. I simply replied, I'm okay. Take care. That might be all the closure I ever get from her, and maybe that's enough. I'm still cautious about whether she changed or just found a new persona that benefits her brand, but I'm not trapped by her shadow anymore. If anything, the experience forced me to confront my own fear of being seen. I'm still a private person by nature, but I no longer shrink away from the camera lens or from people's gaze when they notice my scars. I've learned that I can tell my story on my own terms, whether on a reality TV show or in my personal photography. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I reflect on how bizarre it is that life brought me and Jasmine face to face again. The bully who once ridiculed my scars ended up handing me an unexpected gift, the realization that I no longer needed her validation or fear her opinion. Her attempt to use me for ratings gave me a platform to speak out, and in doing so, I found a piece of myself that I'd kept hidden out of shame. It's a strange sort of full circle, ugly, complicated, and maybe a little bit wonderful in its own twisted way. I don't know if I'll ever wholeheartedly forgive Jasmine. True forgiveness might require a kind of trust I'm not ready to give, but I can let go of the anger that once poisoned my heart. I can move forward knowing that those scars, both on my skin and in my memories, are part of my story, but they don't define my worth. If our confrontation taught me anything, it's that my value isn't determined by someone else's cruelty or praise. And that, perhaps, is the biggest victory I could ever claim over my old bully. I've taken back the narrative she once tried to write for me. Looking ahead, I'm not sure what the future holds. I'm still doing freelance photography, working on a project that features other survivors of various traumas, burns, accidents, self-harm, surgeries, hoping to showcase the beauty and resilience in their scars. Maybe I'll keep expanding that series. Maybe I'll partner with nonprofits. Who knows? The important thing is that I'm no longer hiding. For the first time since that car crash all those years ago, I feel like I can wear short sleeves without constantly worrying what others think. If someone stares, I meet their gaze and smile, unashamed. And if they have questions, I answer them honestly, because my scars aren't a shameful secret anymore. They're a testament to everything I've survived. Sometimes, out of sheer curiosity, I'll flip on the TV or browse online to see if Jasmine's new show is trending. I'll see her flirting with contestants on a yacht or standing on a red carpet in a designer gown. She looks happy, or at least she plays the part convincingly. And I realize with a twinge of relief that I don't envy her. Once, I would have assumed she had the perfect life. Now I see the hustle behind the glamour, the perpetual quest for approval and ratings. I'm sure she's good at it. She's always been good at commanding attention, but that's not the life I want. I want authenticity, even if it's messy and unpolished. So, in a strange twist, I'm grateful for that bully-turned-reality star. By trying to exploit my scars for her narrative, she inadvertently helped me reclaim them for mine. I'm not naive enough to think our brief exchange changed Jasmine profoundly, but maybe a small part of her grew from it, too. And if not, well, that's her journey to figure out. Mine is about embracing who I am, scars and all, and reminding anyone who will listen that our traumas don't have to define us forever. We can outgrow them, even if it takes a bizarre, high-stakes cameo on national television to help us see it. I'm sure there will be more challenges ahead. Life never stops throwing curveballs, but I can handle them now with a confidence I didn't have before. My arms, my neck, my shoulders, they carry the story of a girl who survived a crash, who was bullied mercilessly, who lived in fear of judgment. And now they're also the story of a woman who said yes to being seen, who confronted a bully not just for revenge, but to confront her own hurt and shame, and who walked away stronger. In a way, my scars are my victory flags, silent witnesses to everything I've been through. Let them be seen. Let them speak for me when words fail. They're my reminder that no matter how deep the wounds, we can always rise beyond them and find our own form of healing.